Hey, it's Soul, and welcome back to Warcraft Weekly, the show that really could go on for hours if left unchecked. Help me gain favor with the algorithm gods by liking the video, subscribing if you're not already, and let's get going. Patch 915 arrives next week, bringing some much needed relief to players. If WoW patches were a journey, then Shadowlands for some can feel like a desert, and 9.1 was us reaching an oasis after many long months of walking. So 915 isn't exactly an oasis, it's more like an umbrella and a sack of water to help us along. There are tons of quality of life improvements, but only a spattering of new things to do. At the same time, opportunities open up that can potentially ruin you for months to come. Next Monday's reminder video will get a little bit more in depth on how to optimize your game plan if you're interested in whoring yourself out to all the covenants for their rewards. Meanwhile, this week another shop mount was introduced into the store. It's a cat mount, whoop-de-doo. It does stuff. It costs $25 in the shop, or someone else's $25 if you have the gold. One thing to note, this is not a 6-month promotional mount, so if you want it, you're gonna throw down. Most of you know how I feel about store mounts as an amoral practice, and it's up to us to practice our rights as consumers. And as someone who has an irrational dislike of cats, this is a very easy decision for me to make. However, you can earn a title, even a unique spellbook mount not found anywhere else, that you'll conveniently not mention in conversation as soon as the next shop mount gets to the store. The patch isn't even out yet. This really could have waited until like after Legion Time Walking or something, but no. One thing to point out though, this mount is technically 9.1 content. It was added alongside the previous 6-month subscription mount back in late June, along with a bunch of other cool mounts that you can get from regular play. Oh wait, that's right, that doesn't matter to you, does it? Of course, the principle. Moving on, some big news on the WoW Classic side of the game. The Season of Mastery is going live less than 3 weeks from now, on Tuesday, November 16th. Oh really? What an auspicious week, seeing as how just a few days later, on the 19th, players will finally be able to dive into the world of Nerf Legends. Oh yeah, all your favorite characters like that dude, and that girl in the tights, woo woo. Okay, I'm just kidding, we're obviously talking about the highly anticipated Battlefield 2042, because screw you Activision, Battlefield's still my favorite FPS even though I really suck at it. Okay, no more joking around. Most of you viewers out there have been waiting 2 long years for this release, and here it is, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. What? There are a lot of games coming out that week. Real talk though, folks, if the Final Fantasy XIV servers happen to be wonky during the Endwalker early release weekend, you can at least say that I did offer some suggestions while you're in queue. Seriously, them tights, man. Woo! Back to World of Warcraft, I'll remind you folks next week, but just like the original classic release, name reservations are going to open up on the 11th, so you can try stealing your favorite streamer's name. I haven't talked about this too much, but Season of Mastery is basically a series of fresh WoW Classic servers, separate from the Classic era and Burning Crusade servers. Leveling and progression is going to be a bit faster, and there's a round of tweaks and features to give these realms a different feel, including an Iron Man challenge, killing off world buffs inside raids, even adding mechanics to nerf instances that are regularly farmed by bots and boosters. It'll be super interesting to see how effectively this revitalizes interest in the classic space and how players react to the changes and additions. Within WoW, there's not a ton going on this week, to be honest, mostly us bumming around until the patch, but there's still quite a bit going on in the Blizzard orbit, and let's start with BlizzConline being cancelled. And by that I mean it's not happening, not that it harassed someone. In a statement this week, the studio decided to take a step back and pause on planning the previously announced BlizzConline event scheduled for early next year, citing that they need to ensure that it feels as safe, welcoming, and inclusive as possible, while noting that they'll still be making announcements and updates for their games even though a BlizzConline won't happen. And here's my live reaction. We miss seeing you, but don't worry, we'll be back together soon. How do I feel? I don't really feel much. Clearly I was shocked. There are tons of reasons why BlizzConline isn't happening, let alone an in-person BlizzCon 2022. Now, I love going to BlizzCon. I first went in 2008, and I've been to every single one since. It's tons of fun, with tons of great moments and memories, and I'm glad they canceled it, because obviously it's not a good idea to have one, and let's explain the obvious. Their statement is an optimistic picture that looks towards the future, but at the moment, it's hard to deny that excitement for the company as a whole is at a very low point, with less than stellar slower releases over the past few years, missteps with the World of Warcraft development, increased competition from all sides, and of course the Blizzard lawsuit and its fallout. And then there are more pragmatic reasons. The pandemic is still a pandemic, and while big gatherings are slowly coming back, holding an in-person convention is still a risky venture, and for the reasons I explained before, it's hard to feel really juiced to hold a convention, let alone go to one of theirs. Which leads us back to BlizzConline, with the weight of everything that's going on and Blizzard trying to reset its priorities, improve internally, and get caught up on game delays. Maybe this would be more of a distraction than a morale booster. If a BlizzConline were to be planned for February, maybe this would be undue pressure to rush something presentable when developers aren't ready, and then that's on top of the increasing external pressure for games like Overwatch 2, Diablo 4, and Shadowlands 9.3, or an expansion announcement. The empathetic side of me totally understands the incredible pressure of needing something to show for a big presentation and then be held to that standard when the final product goes live. With this announcement, developers and producers don't have to plan around some events with extra deadlines to hit and such, and they're free to concentrate on delivering a good product. But without a big Blizzard event, speculators like myself are left wondering when announcements like a WoW expansion are going to come. Will it be sooner or later? And the realist and cynic in me says later. And the 24-hour news cycle that is the WoW community will remind us of that every single day. Moving on, a handful of ex-WoW developers banded together to create Notorious Studios, named after the guild that they're all a part of, which I'm guessing was named after, probably, yeah. One of their co-founders, Chris Kotick, made a bit of a scene when he left Activision Blizzard last year, posting a YouTube video explaining his disagreements and ultimately why he decided to depart. Notorious joins a growing number of ex-Blizzard studios, including Dreamhaven, run by former president Mike Morhaime, who has been building partnerships with several of them. I imagine it's only a matter of time before they all fully merge into a single entity called Snowy Stuff. Jokes aside, like all these companies, it's going to be a while before we see anything of substance, so this isn't exactly going to be a rival company. Activision Blizzard doesn't see it as a competitor. Actually, it's probably too busy trying to not punch itself in the face. Last week we learned that the Sylvanas book was being pushed back a month, with speculation leaning towards wanting it to time with an eventual 9.2 release. This week though comes a different delay, this time with the Exploring Kalimdor book, only in this case the book was meant to be released this month and is being pushed back to December 7th. This is pretty unfortunate, but unlike the Sylvanas book, there isn't much of a conspiracy to be had given the lateness of the delay, if that makes sense. This is just another symptom of the massive supply chain problems happening all over the world. A New York Times article late last week reported on the numerous problems that book publishers face at every level of production, from acquiring materials to shipping. According to those interviewed, professionals say that a shipping container that used to cost $2,500 can now go for as much as $25,000. Ports like Los Angeles and Long Beach are full of ships waiting in line for containers to be taken off of them because there aren't enough workers to move them, and the US government is stepping in to keep things moving. Trucks are more expensive, containers are more expensive, labor is more expensive, and the mess has led to a cascade of date changes, sometimes postponing a book for a few weeks, other times for a few months. Even before the Sylvanas book, people noticed problems with Grimoire of the Shadowlands, which experienced a very awkward and staggered release, with some having to wait over a month after the original launch date to receive their copy. Now, it's one thing for the Sylvanas book to be pushed back, especially twice, but we learned this well before their original release date. Exploring Kalimdor was pushed back at the last second, and there's been no statement from Blizzard, who is the publisher. Usually advanced copies would have been sent to fan sites like Wowhead or lore-centric content creators, but there hasn't been a peep, and that's where we're at with this. And last but not least, let's talk about the letter written from Activision Blizzard's CEO, dude, every sentence is pain. And last but not least, let's talk about the letter written from Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick, because everything is suddenly fixed, right? No, but we are going to get past the lip service and get right to the meat of what went down the other day, because this directly addresses the demands of ABK workers that have been repeated all over the news and on social media. The letter reads that we are launching a new zero-tolerance harassment policy company-wide, noting that they terminated some employees and provided verbal or written warnings or different disciplinary actions to others. That's not to say zero tolerance means zero investigation or accountability. This isn't the schoolyard, it's a freaking company. There's a new investigative process, and the company will no longer rely on written warnings. Termination will be the outcome. including in most cases of harassment based on any legally protected category. Now let's get to directly addressing the demands. First, they are waiving required arbitration of sexual harassment and discrimination claims, which is huge, sort of, but still huge, sort of, and here's why. Arbitration is a way to resolve legal disputes like harassment, but it falls outside of your traditional court system. It's an agreement to have a person hear the employee's and the employer's case. The problem with it is that when a judgment is made, there's little to no chance to make an appeal. What's worse is that in many companies, employees sign an arbitration agreement, meaning that as soon as you're hired, you waive your right to sue your employer. Meanwhile, in the state of California, there's an ongoing seesaw battle against arbitration, and at the moment, mandatory arbitration agreements are prohibited, but this case is more than likely to go to the Supreme Court, and a final resolution could take a while. What makes Kotick's statement important is that he's putting an end to mandatory arbitration regardless of the final outcome of its legality, which is good. However, it only applies to sexual harassment and discrimination claims, so the scope of this statement is limited. Of course, ideally, legal disputes between employee and employer don't have to happen either if resolutions can be found before resorting to this. The next part was to improve representation. Kotick's pledged to increase the percentage of women and non-binary people in their workforce by 50%, which in context is to have 1/3 of their company be staffed by not men. To make this happen, they're going to invest $250 million over the next 10 years in initiatives that foster expanded opportunities in gaming and technology for underrepresented communities. Many critics are skeptical of this and similar ideas, pointing out that any company ought to seek out the most qualified talent first and foremost, but many others would disagree, noting various statistics that identify women and minorities as those who have fewer opportunities to become the most qualified and have to work magnitudes harder just to compete at an even playing field. And that is the core issue this initiative hopes to address. Pay transparency is also being addressed in the letter, pointing out that women earn slightly more than men for comparable work in 2020, but conveniently didn't point out the disparity between Activision Blizzard and other companies for comparable work, but that's a more complicated issue than it first seems. This transparency is said to be reported annually, which hopefully should give current and prospective employees a leg up at the negotiating table for better pay compared to their counterparts in other studios. And while the company isn't going to go as far as letting a third-party watchdog monitor their policy movements, they are going to make regular progress updates every quarter, with an annual report to shareholders with information on gender hiring, diversity hiring, and workplace progress. And as a bit of a cherry on top, Kotick also shared that until his board agrees that the initiatives being put forward in this letter have been achieved, he will take a massive pay cut, all the way down to the minimum salary a CEO can technically make in the state of California. I'd also like to add though that he's 60 years old and worth almost $7 billion. Feel free to draw your own conclusion. So pack it up, folks. Yes, we did it! We tweeted and downvoted our way to victory, right? Right, sure. Yeah, credit where credit's due. ABK employees got a long-awaited win, but there is still a lot more to be done. So for now, this is where we're at, and that is the show. Next week is gonna feel busy, for me at least, and by busy, I mean I'm gonna be doing a lot of mundane stuff like farming for anima, doing old campaign stuff, and farming for anima. I invite you to join me next week during next week's stream to just chill and farm and rediscover Shadowlands. Maybe discover things for the first time for those of you who haven't played through the different Covenant storylines. Earlier this week, I accidentally switched my paladin to the Nightfade Covenant, which was horrific. However, next week I'm gonna go all in, knowing that I can switch back to the Kyrian whenever I feel like. The question for those of you who are going to be doing it, how are you going to approach this whole Covenant switching thing? Who are you going to join or not join? Will you work on one at a time? Will you spread yourself across all four? Or are you still on the fence? Share your thoughts about this or anything that we had shared today. As always, a big thanks to our lovely subscribers over on Twitch, our valued patrons, our contributors, and to you for making it to the end. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and I will see you next week. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.